All right, let's see what we got going on here. So, we are continuing from last night in our series on the Socratic method to learn Ansible. The Socratic method is anytime we decide to sit around and ask questions about, can I do this? Do I understand that? How did I get to that? Right? So we already went through the first 5, really into the 6th lab. So we were down, I left it on lab 6, so that's kind of where we're at. And so we'll pick it up, we'll do that lab real quick, and then we'll kind of start moving on into some of the other pieces. I'll give people a few more minutes to show up, and then we'll kind of get started here. In the meantime, check out Ranger. He's conked out pretty good. That's my dog, Ranger. And I put his bed back, and he had all the excitement of the landscapers come by. So, and Street Track over on YouTube said, thanks for the content. Yeah, well, hey, the goal of this stuff, this group, is to get people into doing Linux, make you guys professionals at it, and show you that you can do it, right? Like, a lot of us are amateurs and we like to play with this stuff, but if you guys want to get into doing it professionally, there's all the tools out there to do that. So that's kind of what we're doing. So, okay. So I gave it enough time. I see people popping on both sides, so we'll get going, right? Without further ado, right? We're just going to drop into lab 6. I'm going to link this to people that want to do it, and I will pin it on the YouTube or on the Twitch side. I don't have a facility to pin on the YouTube side as best I can tell, so I'm just going to drop it in here. You also have down in our Discord any of the links to get to the lab stuff, and it's really just Killer Coda and then look me up, right? Hetanis on there, and I'm just the guy who's the face of this whole thing. But when you get down in the Discord, you find out that there's better engineers than me down there. So, all right, what are we doing? In this lab, we are going to create a playbook to deploy an application. Guys, there's a lot of ways to do this. I'm not being prescriptive here. I'm not showing you this is the only way. I'm showing you this is a way. And if you were here yesterday in the labs, we were starting with Ansible with no knowledge of it, and we installed it. Then we built an inventory for it. Now we have all that stuff. We've played with the ad hoc mode. Now we've built with some playbooks, like the basics of how these things work. A question, starting off my PhD soon, so I got to get into Linux. I guess that's the right place. Yeah. Ruturaj, hopefully the PhD goes well. I'm working on my doctorate now. It's a DBA, so it won't be a PhD, but still doctor, right? Me and some of my friends that are getting their doctorates, we joke around about how we're really just getting them so that we can make a situation immediately worse when somebody says, is there a doctor? I can say, yeah, I'm a doctor of business administration. What do you want to know? Tell him to check his portfolio out or whatever, or here's some business analytics or whatever. And one of my friends he's in econometrics, which is like econ, but it's kind of very specific. And he's like, I just want to make a situation immediately worse. So that's kind of funny. All right. But let's get into the lab. But yeah, congratulations on starting on the PhD. That's it's a very big step, a very daunting task to write out a dissertation. If some of you have never done it before, it's a big task. All right, so let's get into this lab for people that want to do it. People that want to watch, I can't make you do the labs, but I can promise you that by getting your hands on these labs and by doing anything, if it's not one of my labs, find some other labs that you like to do. The process of typing and learning these things will change the way that you look at things. It will make you a better engineer. It will teach you how certain things work. And I think that there's some value to you rather than just watching. I'm not saying you couldn't just watch me. It's just doing these things along with me or with somebody else that's more interesting is perfectly acceptable. All right, and it's good for you. It's the same thing with, like, I've had a gym membership for 20 years. That doesn't mean I'm in good shape. What it means is I've had a gym membership. If I haven't been going, if I haven't been working out, that's on me. It's the same thing with your brain, right? All right, so anyways, let's get into this. Let's cat root hosts and see our host file. Okay, our host file is hosted. All right. We've got in this host file, and this is the inventory file, as we call it. There is a host group and 2 nodes that belong to that host group. This is an INI format. We looked at it yesterday. We can feed in via INI format or YAML. We can get out JSON, YAML, or this graph type stuff, right? So there's different ways to get that out. That's in one of the labs from yesterday, right? BusyBit just showing up to drop a thumbs up. Yeah, thanks, Accelerate. Hopefully this stuff's useful to you. Let's go ahead and deploy this playbook. So we can just copy it so that we can look at it. And this playbook is pretty straightforward. So root deploy.yaml is pretty straightforward. What does it do? It does the same thing as the last one. It starts out as a block of YAML. -- tells the system that it's YAML. Then it comes down here and it gives a name, the start of our deployer playbook. We could add or remove tasks from this as we go. We have the host that we're going to hit. That is going to come directly from the host group name inside of whatever inventory we give it. If we give it an inventory that doesn't have servers, this playbook's going to break. It's going to say, actually, it doesn't even break. It just says no host match. We can do that real quick. We'll pretend and we'll see. And then we come down here with vars, and vars are we don't have any special variables we need to give to this. We can feed variables in like 22 different ways. And you say, Scott, did you just make that number up? Did you say 22 off the top of your head? No, I've actually looked at this enough. I'm going to show you guys right now variable precedence, but you could feed variables into Ansible all kinds of different ways. And there's a precedence to it. So Ansible variables, right? Probably spell it right. And here's using variables. I'll link this to you guys here in a second. And then there's variable precedence. Where should I put a variable? And look, there's the 22 places in order of the highest precedence to the lowest of where things are going to happen. So I'll link this over to you guys on the Twitch side and the YouTube side so you have it. And I wonder how that works. Like, if somebody's watching the video later on the YouTube side, I wonder how it, how the documentation, I wonder how the video shows the things that I link. But hopefully you can at least go Google the same thing I did, or DuckDuckGo, or whatever you're using to find here are the pieces that Ansible will look in the order it'll look. Now, look, we don't need to know all of those. One of the things about learning things through like a Socratic method or asking ourselves questions is we're just saying, can I figure this out? Can I figure that out? Right? So we don't need to know everything. We just need to know the next piece that we need. So I'm trying to show you guys some of the different ways to get to kind of a completed knowledge set of using this, right? But anyways, that's variables. Gather facts is true, so what Ansible is going to do is it's going to run factor on the machines. It runs a module called setup, and it goes and it gathers a bunch of information about the servers and throws it, like Ansible kind of, however you want to visualize this. I think of it as it's got this little sack or a little backpack on it, and it keeps track of all the variables about all the servers that it's touching. We can reference those variables anytime we want to later, and we can do all the same stuff every time. All right, I'll get to that here in a second. Become is false. We don't need to become the root user. We're already the root user. But there's not going to be a become method run by Ansible, and that's fine. And then we get into our tasks. Tasks are a list in YAML. Each of these items are starting with a dash, their own task, right? Their own task, but they're an item in a list in YAML as far as the YAML cares. We come down here, we've got name. This is exactly the same from the last lab. If you were doing the last lab with us, lab 5, this is the whole first part of the playbook here, right here. And then all we did was we started adding to it. So we came down here, we did a copy module, we copied over this deployer, we gave it a checksum so that we knew that nobody changed anything in our lab. Very important in the engineering world. If other admins are out there and they're doing stuff even for good reasons, we still want to make sure that we're not on a different version of this tar.gz. Somebody could have repackaged it up with the new stuff for a new baseline. I still need to know that because I don't want to have the rest of my stuff break because of assumptions, right? File, we're going to create a directory at this path. So this is the module here. So here's the name. This is an arbitrary name. You could type 1, 2, 3, 4 in there. We use this because it's very nice when we do the deployer. That output that comes out is very nice to go feed in over to our configuration management database, right? Our CMDB. I've got a change record for the night. I'm doing my patching or whatever. I'm doing my update and my deploy of an application. And all of these things are, I don't want to call them self-documenting, right? Because they're not really self-documenting. It's just these were the tasks that maybe I told the change management team and the managers that we were doing. And then I can verify that they actually happened the way that we want to. Hey, Kurt Killer, how's it going? Thanks for Thanks for being here and working on. We're just asking ourselves questions. We're doing the labs, and then we're asking ourselves questions. Can I do this? Can I do that? Because that's kind of the Socratic method of learning and internalizing things. So look, we go down. We've got the file. We make the directory, opt_my_app. We untar the archive into there. We make the file executable. Kurt Killer, that's fine, man. You never have to. We don't take attendance around here if you're late or if you haven't been here for the last few days. We just keep on rolling, man. We just keep rolling, and like Linux is still going to be there. Ansible's still going to be there. The professional Linux users group's still going to be there. You guys never have to apologize to me if you show up late. You can always watch the videos later and stuff. So yeah, I appreciate, and I'm always motivated by people coming by. You know, I don't charge anything for any of this, except I think you got to watch some ads on Twitch and YouTube. But other than that, it's, you know, just us hanging out or whatever. So, and then when we're done, we're going to run it. But remember, I was telling you guys that the thing about a shell command, you always got to watch. You always got to understand why you do things. We tell kids, if anybody here's had kids, I got called the best. Yes, I don't flatter me. Don't tell me I'm the best. It'll all go to my head, and then my wife will have to hear about it later. Seabear said, "How are you? I got a tech question." You can ask any question you want, Seabear. I'll try to answer it. But real quick about the shell command. Remember, all these other commands are Python modules being pushed over and run, and the shell command is no different, but you got to remember, this is just going to execute the deployment of a shell script on that far machine, and Ansible, during this execution right here, will lose control. It's waiting, but it's kind of like it just launched something off onto, you know, it's a cannon shooting off into the night. Ansible doesn't know what that's doing, so it has no control over it. All these other modules, it's got positive control, and it's doing checks, and it's verifying if it has to do things, and it's doing this thing called idempotency, right? Where if a variable in a matrices doesn't have to change, it's called an idempotent variable, right? Well, we don't have idempotency. That's the mathematical term, by the way. Idempotency comes from mathematics. Ansible just supplanted it, right? We use it over, different engineers use different terms. But when we're done, we register the variable, and then we look at the variable. So we ran this yesterday, but we didn't really get to talk about it because the wife came home. And I've been streaming earlier because the wife has been coming home a little later. She's been... we've had a lot of graduations with kind of friends and families, and she's been going to like 8th grade graduations, all these other things. And I've been teaching, I teach college on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night. So I can't go to the kids' graduations. So then I have this little bit of time here where I can stream a little early. So that's why I've been on a little early, if anybody's been wondering. But yeah, Seabear, feel free to ask me any questions you need to. So we look here, here's the pieces, right? We break it all down and we do all this stuff. Yeah, it's a very busy month. Kurt Killer, my wife is first off, my wife gets 2 cards a week, and you might say, really, like 2 cards mailed to her, physically mailed to her, not emailed, physically mailed to her a week. And you say 2? I'd say that's about the average per month. Yeah, she gets a lot of cards from just friends and people she's known. But around this time, we know so many people, right? I mean, we're in our 40s now, so we know so many people that have kids that are graduating. So we're literally, and she loves to do like, well, it's 2024, so all the kids are getting in their low card $24. So she has to go get a bunch of money out of the bank and do little 2024 things for the kids or whatever. So there's that. Okay, so it runs. I'm going to run this, and then I'm going to read this question. So we're going to execute the playbook, right? So we execute it, and look at how kind of nice this looks. I'm going to move this over a little bit so you guys can see it. It's going to tell me what it's doing on each of the steps. I'm going to answer, or I'm going to look at this question. Seabear said, my buddy's trying to stream live on Twitch. He's enabled OBS software on the firewall, updated drivers, and the internet connection has gained 25 to 30 megabits per second upload. OBS says he's dropping frames. Would you have any ideas what he might try as a solution? I'm trying to be a tech here, but I'm completely ignorant when it comes to Twitch streaming. What ideas would make a world of difference? Looks like a polling service I've been monitoring through Putty this morning. Interesting, Seabear. Yeah, I guess what I would do if I were them is I would just try to... I imagine they're doing this off a Windows box and not something else. Most people stream OBS off of Windows. You could do it off of Linux, though. But I guess I would just make sure that as they're streaming, you can actually look at... I keep like my stream manager open so I can see my bit rate, and I can actually see what's going up to Twitch. And I can see YouTube has some kind of thing for me on that as well. I don't know exactly. But the point is I can see where the data are flowing, kind of, and I can see if there's anything going slow. I wouldn't expect firewalls or any of those other things to be doing anything, because most of those are stateful and they're letting the traffic go out no matter what. Like the frames would go up. You can change inside of. I don't use OBS. I use Streamlabs desktop, so I know I use like a little bit different one than everybody else does. The OBS one, I know you can change the frame rates, and I know you can change the source that's being sent up. So it would go up to 3K bitrate and then boom, dropping frames. Yeah, I don't see better. That's super weird. I would. So these are the things I would do if I was like troubleshooting as an engineer. I would test my assumptions. Are we hitting some kind of high limit? So what I would do then is if I'm going up to a 3K bitrate, whatever 3K bitrate is in the volume of what that system can handle, I would figure out if I could step it down to a lower quality and still get the information to flow. And then do I start to see the frame rates drop? Now that doesn't completely say that there's a problem right at 3K bitrate, whatever that is, right? So then I would test and I would see where I don't drop frames. And then I would start to go look at any of these other things. Kurt Killer said use Wireshark to see if any packets are being dropped. Yeah, there's that. You can do on the Windows side, there's tools that are like that. On the Linux side, I use a thing. So if we're doing Linux, which we're doing Linux, right? We're always doing Linux around here. There's a tool with sar-n dev, and then we could do TCP and ETCP. Is that right? Dash N. Is that it? I haven't done it on this system before, maybe. But you can see errors and you can see packet drops and that kind of stuff on the Linux side. What is the name of that? How's that command work? I have to look it up. I don't remember how that command works right off. I have it in here. Hold on. Some of my Linux labs have it. Networking. Nope. That's how you do TCP for people that care about that stuff. SAR. I think that's in the Linux labs. Shoot, yeah, I don't know exactly what it is. Might be in this initial system setting one. SAR-N, it's lowercase n. Damn it. I knew it was something stupid like that. Lowercase n, capital dev. And then, hold on. We don't need the dev on that one. All right, fair enough. There we go. And then apparently I don't even have the log going, but apparently I'm not running SAR. But if I was running SAR, we would see the output of errors in my system and retransmits, and that's kind of an important thing on there to know. No, Seabear, you're fine. I was looking at that real quick to see if I would have that. But yeah, that's what I would look at. I would see, are we hitting some high watermark? Do we only do it at certain thresholds? And then I would try to back it off. And also, as Kurt Killer mentioned, you could also do Wireshark. Kurt Killer, the thing I was looking at was SAR. SAR. Okay, so look, we did this the other day and we deployed our system, and then we looked and we saw the output. And then here's some questions. How did this lab build on the previous lab? Well, it built on it in such a way that all we did before was stage files. Now we actually did a for deploy. And I said, why did we have to make the installer script executable? So right here, when it said make the installer script executable, why did we have to do a 0755 to make that run, or 0750, whatever we made it? I think we made it, 0755. Why did we do that? Well, the reason we did that was because we had packaged it up so that it wasn't executable. That's just like a safety thing, like don't leave something just ready to go, like with the safety off. We have to set it to be executable when we're ready to. Yep. That's why we made it executable. And then we ran that installer. That installer only did two things. It said I would be deploying some stuff and I would be deploying some more stuff. We can even go look at that if we really wanted to. We can go look at what's in there. We can see that there's a deploy in there. We can CD on this box. So the machine we're using, CD into opt, my app, deploy. And then in here, we can see the deployer. We can go look at what that deployer shell script does. It's like the easiest little shell script you've ever seen. It gives the shebang line at the top saying that we're using bin bash. By the way, that's the default it would have been anyways. But I can't assume all the machines I'm pushing this to are going to be bash as the default shell. So I'm saying, I don't care what you're used to using, do bash right now, right? And then it's doing some echo, it sleeps, and it echoes some more. We could do any steps we wanted to in here. This script could go find stuff out about the architecture. Like we could do a uname-m and see the architecture of the system, uname-r to make sure it's at least the right version. And we could do really simple steps and checks inside of our normal bash scripts. And that's how we've done it. That's how I did it for the last 20 years. But Ansible has made a lot of this stuff easier where I can push this over and deploy. Now you might say, why didn't you just deploy whatever it is with Ansible? That's the first question, right? Because couldn't you, instead of running a script, couldn't you do it all in Ansible? And the answer is no, not if we got it from a vendor. Sometimes you get scripts from vendors. I don't know if anybody here has ever installed Oracle on a Linux box. Oracle like a database. I guarantee you right now you're not installing that from a set of steps. Your steps are get their downloader and run it. That's what the steps are. So you don't get the ability to go and do different pieces of it. You're just, and NVIDIA drivers are the same way. You get NVIDIA drivers, you go in, you hit the button, and you deploy them. And your options are to do them silent or do them as a normal install that's interactive, right? A lot of systems still using CSH as a default shell. Always use the shebang line. I agree with that, Enigma. I used to work on systems that were heavily C shell or K shell as the defaults, and we use this just because it'll tell the system to use that interpreter. Now, real quick, if you used bin K shell, KSH, but that wasn't on all your servers, then I just need you to know that this script would just break. But if it wasn't on your servers and you wrote it in K shell, it would have broken anyways, guys. So you don't lose anything by putting a shebang line and being explicit. This is almost like I'm coming to this stream here and then I go, Less Than T and Robodom, thank you for being here. We are going to be speaking in English today. And you go, Scott, I've known you for 3 years. You've never spoken in anything but English and gibberish. And I go, well, we're doing English today, right? But you go, well, that's being a bit explicit, right? But sometimes we have to do that, right? So in the systems world, this doesn't cost us anything. This is just a tiny little bit of, 1 kilobyte or probably 1 kilobyte or less, in the whole file. So this is a few bytes right here to just have that at the top, leave it there, right? Tells the system to be explicit. So we ran all this, right? We can always rerun our playbooks. This is the thing I like to show you guys. Rerun your playbook and look at how it's different. We want the actual playbook run right here. And look at how it runs differently. Now the yellow is all going to be green because it doesn't have to do all of those things. But what things are still yellow? Remember I told you there's one thing that'll always be yellow? By the way, why did the untar the deployer have to happen again? Well, it had to happen again because it has to untar that package, even if it was already there. And also the installer script is in a different configuration. So it always has to unpackage. We then have to make it executable again. And when we run it here, any shell command will always be changed. I was telling you guys this the other day about, or I was telling you this yesterday about, this is very important to understand. This will never be okay. So if you think a playbook, if you want to write a playbook that's clean and it's all just okay at the bottom and there's no change, you cannot use shell scripts. Shell scripts, CMD, and exec, those three, they lose the control for Ansible until they come back, and they will always say changed. Because Ansible doesn't know what happened after it fired the cannon off into the night. Doesn't know what happened. So it just has to say changed. All right. So just know that. Okay. So then we come over here. What information comes out with the debug of the shell? What is the RC? Anybody know what an RC is? That hails back to olden days, right? Some of our programmer guys here. What's our RC? And then what is standard out? And why might we use that? And what might we look for in there? Return code. Yep, it's the return code. And typically we want a return code of 0. We exit good, right? Yep. So this is actually capturing the return code from the execution of that shell. Yes, that's exactly what it's doing. It's the same as back in our bash script days when we would do a $question mark. And in some of my logic stuff down in the Linux labs, I have you guys look at $question mark. That is the exit code of the last, or the return code of the last executed thing in the shell. And you can do that. You can see if things are on. You can do all this kind of stuff. Okay. So we come down here and there's some other information. And then I have some questions over here in the lab. So can you write a playbook that pushes a file to all servers? And I say, yeah, I think I can do that. So I'm going to clear. I'm going to CD back to root. And, oh, I told you guys I was going to do something. I'm going to copy hosts to host Scott example. And I'm going to VI host Scott example. And I'm going to change servers here to not servers, right? I'm being very sneaky. It's not servers. So cat hosts Scott example is not servers. And I'm going to run this playbook, but I'm going to use that hosts Scott example. So I said this earlier that, remember, so this is one of these things where I talk about one test is worth 1,000 expert opinions. I said that earlier, that if I go to a properly formatted, that's a properly formatted INI file for hosts, that if you tried to run, I'm going to pound this out real quick, hold on. If we did a head on root deploy.yaml, and right here it's going to call the host servers, but then you feed it this value like I have right here, right? And you run it, what I said would happen is it would find no inventory. It wouldn't break. It would find no inventory. And you probably all trusted me or said, Scott probably knows what he's doing. But this is one of these examples where I tell you, well, let's just run it. Let's see if I have this is a very broken example right here. I have, right here, I'm saying use the host group servers from the inventory that you're giving me. And the inventory that we're giving me does not have a host group servers. We called it something silly like not servers. And it's not going to find anything. But it's not going to break the execution of Ansible. It just said, no host matched. But what if how could I fix that? Root deploy.yaml. What if I did this? And I told you guys this the other day. This is very dangerous. Don't do this in your work. All. What if I change that to all? WQ. And I run this now. Will this find it? Robodom, that's fine. Don't worry about unpinning it. You're good. Now it found them all, even though, and it still had to change on those ones. It found them all, even though it didn't have a good name. It just used the keyword of all. And I want you guys to know that it's very dangerous. If you don't, or if you have somebody on your team that doesn't know how to use inventories and doesn't know what inventory they're hitting, all is exceptionally dangerous. I told you guys at AAA, I watched somebody almost take the whole company down. We would have been on the news. We would have been completely down, like probably for weeks, if what he had run had hit all the servers. It was a baseliner for a new security baseline, and it was a baseliner that would set all the servers a certain way, and your servers that are already there will get murdered when they get changed from the whatever they're running to that new baseline. Security is always, I know this is controversial, but this is a statement that we use in engineering. Security is the enemy of productivity. It is not to say that security isn't very important. It is. But security is the enemy of productivity is the idea that security slows down productivity. And it's true. If you've ever walked into an office and you had a little badge and you had to go like that with the badge and scan in, and then it opened the door, and then you had to close the door for your buddy because they're not allowed to tailgate. Then you get to your desk and you got to log in. And while you're logging in, your system boots up and has all these startup scripts and all these things that are happening for security. That's all slowing you down. You might not think about it much, but over time, that does slow you down, right? Twisted Seed, how's it going? Hopefully this stuff's useful to you. That's over on the Twitch side. We are most secure server is the one that's unplugged. True. And Enigma's right. The secure server is one that's unplugged. And we used to joke around about that. I can make a server that's confidentiality, integrity, and availability is 100%. It just won't be on the network. And then if it does affect availability, if it's not there. So yeah, users hate security. That's true. And users will do all kinds of things to bypass security. So will security engineers. People will bypass things that are too bothersome for them. They will bypass it all kinds of ways. And we try to train users not to bypass it by just putting their password across the bottom of their monitor or whatever. But that was a big thing for a long time. People would just write their password because it was such a hassle for them to remember it, right? All right. So can I write a playbook that pushes a file to all servers? I think I can do that. So I'm going to copy my deploy.yaml over to Scott example.yaml, right? Let's go to my Scott example.yaml, and I will delete all of this stuff because I like to steal. They say good writers borrow, great writers steal. I'm just going to steal that for myself, and I'm going to say, okay, name is push a file to all servers, right? And then I'm going to need the copy module for that probably. And then right here, I'm going to say source and destination. By the way, some of you might be saying, Scott, why'd you delete all that other stuff? You had one. I could have just used that too. But I need a source and destination, maybe root hosts. That was a file that we had. And maybe I push it over to temp hosts.back or something like that. Just a backup file, right? And by the way, guys, you know in Linux, the dot extensions do not matter. Don't matter at all. Linux doesn't care. The only reason these might matter a little bit is for ls colors. But otherwise, like I tell you guys, you shouldn't rely as a Linux engineer on the colors that come out of the OS. The colors that come up through your ls colors it's not something you want to rely on. So this dot back is just there for us to go look at later. Escape : WQ. Oh, I am going to save myself some trouble, and I am going to go back to servers, right? Escape : WQ. I can cat that Scott example file, and there's that. And then I can come up here, and I'll just steal some stuff for myself. Where's my old execution of this? I'd love to just steal in instead of trying to do things. So root deploy.yaml is now going to be root Scott example.yaml. I prefer to put our passwords on a separate personal doc. Yeah, Robedum. Yeah. Weakest link. Yeah, Kurt Killer. I've been saying this for a long time in the security world. There's misconfigured devices and misconfigured users, right? And those are the two things that can be misconfigured in your system. I can tell you guys a story if you want about security. When I first got out of the Army, I worked for the Peoria School District, and I was in college, and I did a lot of reading of security stuff. And I remember in 2004, so this was 2004, the IRS did a I guess this would have been like a kind of early example of like a social engineering thing against their IRS agents. And what they did was they called them up and said, we're the tech team for the IRS. We are the IRS tech team. And this is a study, this is published. You can go look this up. It happened in 2004 because the year before they reference in there as well, and that was 2003. So this is what they did. They said, okay, we're from your tech department. We need your password. And they were ecstatic with the results. The results were that only 50% of the IRS agents gave their password over the phone to somebody. They were ecstatic. 2004, the study came out. It was 50% of the IRS agents that were doing whatever they were doing got called in this little social media thing. Hold on. In 2003, when they did it, it was 90%. That is a 40% better than what it was in 2003. And I don't know if any of you guys have any of the old Yahoo and AOL or any of those old mails that used to be around, but they always used to tell you, nobody will ever ask you for a password. Stop thinking that nobody here will ever ask you for a password, because people used to give them out. Nowadays, I think if you ask somebody like under 40, give me a password, they'd probably just punch you. They wouldn't give you, if I walked up and I was like, hey, can I have the password to your phone? You'd be like that guy in the thing. You'd be like, I love that. From, what was that? The interview or whatever. What is his name? I don't know. Anyways, but the point is, we're going to run this. Don't worry about me. But yeah, the IRS, they did a study and they had this ridiculous amount of people, but it was really low compared to the year before. All right. So, and it was 50% and 90%. Those were the two numbers. All right. Run it again. Doesn't have to push the file again. Boom. So the question was, can we write a playbook? And this was our little example playbook. It's simpler than what we did in the lab, but it made me think, could I push something somewhere else? So there we go. All right. So we're going through this, right? Can you write a playbook that pushes file to all servers? Yeah, I could do that. Can you write a playbook that executes a command on all servers and stores it as a variable? And I go, huh. I don't know. Yeah, I guess I could try to do that. Let's just add to my little Scott's example here. And I come down here, and one of the nice things about this is I'm just going to keep making things right here. And Scott command example. And what's the easiest shell command I can think to do? Uptime. I love doing uptime on servers. And then I'm going to register it as a variable called uptime check, right? Then I can come down here and it says, and so we stored it as a variable. We know that works. But we can make one that says output debug for uptime check, right? We can do this. And then this will be the debug module. And the debug one can be really simple. We can say var is uptime check. But I'm going to make this a little bit different, and I'll show you guys something. This comes up in some of our later labs. Verbosity is the argument. By the way, if I didn't know the argument, you guys know where I'd go reference it, right? I'd just go right up and look up the module on my Google search, Ansible module debug, and it'll go and give me all the info. Verbosity 2. So let's run this playbook and see what happens now. By the way, you say, well, Scott, isn't that other stuff there? Well, it's gonna verify and not have to do the copy again. But let's see if this works. Okay, so it pushes the file. It runs the command. It skipped the uptime check. But why did it skip the uptime check? Well, because I said, unless you put 2 V's in this for a higher level of verbosity, don't give me the output. And that's super useful if you want to, if you want to write a playbook that's doing all this other stuff and checking all this other stuff, and you don't want it to dump those debug values out on your users. So when I say users, for a configuration playbook, the only people that will probably ever be running it are your junior engineers on your team, right? We're assuming you've been doing this for a while now and you're the senior, but your junior engineers are going to run it, and maybe I don't want to drop a bunch of debug information in their faces. Or 2, if I'm giving it over to like an operations or a bridge type team as well, right? And Robodom just dropped the labs on everybody. So, whoops. Oh, yeah. Oh, by the way, so here's the questions. Can you debug a variable in a playbook? I just did it. And can you only do it at a level 2 verbosity? So we just did that as well, which is right here. Now this is going to dump a bunch of blue to the screen, but right at the end, it's also going to run that task. So it gave us a bunch of information, and now it ran that task for output debug for the uptime check. And it said, here's the output for that command. If I wanted to see what happened, what's going on these servers, here's the uptime information. And I use that. I actually later on in these playbooks and also professionally, I use uptime checks like this a lot. And the reason I do that is there's 2 things I want to know when I health check. I have like 1,200 nodes in one of my clusters. It's 1,260 nodes, but 1,211 of them are the processing nodes. Those 1,211 nodes, I want to know 2 things about them every single morning when I come in. And you say, well, what are they? 1, are they reachable? So I get a list at the beginning of all the unreachable nodes. I do this from my Jinja templates. We're going to get into Jinja templates here in the next couple. But I want to know my unreachable nodes. That's the first thing. Because if I have 0 unreachable nodes on a normal day, and now I have 1 to many, that's a problem. But I know exactly which ones are the problems because I can't reach them. So basically, I'm just touching my servers every day, making sure they're there. And the other one, this is one that I kind of just figured out over time. Nobody taught me this. You probably won't even find this in an engineering book. I'm just going to tell you this one that I use. I look for uptime. I do an uptime like this. And when you look at enough uptimes as an engineer, you know that it doesn't say the word day when it's under a day. This has been up 1 hour and 43 minutes. There is nothing in the standard output for the word day. Down here in my systems, I look at uptime and I see the word day because this server's been up 145 days, right? So what I do then is I look for, in the uptime of all my servers, again, 1,211, actually I do this against all 1,265, I want to see if any node rebooted. Is the word day not, I use the Python check for not in the output. And then you say, well, Scott, why would I want to know that? Because I want to know, because it's not because I'm, I'm super in control of all my systems and I got to white knuckle it. No, I want to know, did any of my servers across my cluster reboot yesterday? And you say, well, how many nodes do you expect to reboot in a day? Well, I'll tell you, if I'm not doing maintenance on my servers, I expect a 0 right there. But what if I see 4? Then I got to go figure out why those 4 happened. And if you stay on top of stuff like that, you might say, like, Scott, that seems like real out of control. If you stay on top of stuff like that, you'll find that it keeps your whole cluster just much more clean. It's just it's like the idea of, why do we make a bed? It just gets unmade again. And why do I sweep out the room? It's just going to get dusty again. Well, because it prevents malicious stuff. Yeah, it's there's a lot of things that happen when a server goes down and comes back up that are indicative of somebody trying to get into it as well. That is actually true. Robodom mentioned prevent malicious code. It's do you guys know what's the primary indicator if somebody's about to ingress a building? Learned this back in my army days, back in the infantry. What do we do first before we go into a building? Cut the power to it, right? One of the ways that we compromise servers is by rebooting them and getting to their boot prompts, whether we're physically there or we found some way into the consoles. So that is a way to help us minimize. So again, I just like to look at my servers and say, well, that information doesn't look right. So I make sure, and we're going to do these in some of the future labs. Can I hit my server? Is it there? If it's not there, I got to go check on it. Why? And then the other one is, has my server rebooted? Because servers that reboot can, in stateless environments, can take new images that they shouldn't. They can, in stateful environments, they can be compromised. Stateless environments, I guess they could also be compromised, but not as much. But stateless environments, what that is the server is coming up with a new net boot each time. However, you end up pulling that over your faster network typically. So, all right. So I know I'm going far afield, but these are valuable things, I think, for those of you that want to get into the engineering space, right? We're doing these things, and then we're asking ourselves questions. Can I do these things? Yeah, so could I... so for right here, can I... Here were our questions. Could we write a playbook that pushes a file to the servers? Yes, right here. This was our playbook that pushed a file to all servers. There. So we did that. Could I execute a command on all the servers and store it as a variable? Yes. I can do the uptime and I can register the variable so that, and I know this sounds silly, guys, but Ansible is walking along its path with like a little sack of variables. And when I run this on all my servers, it takes that and it stuffs it in the little sack that it's carrying over its shoulder. And now Ansible can use that uptime check anywhere else for the rest of the play. All right. Then I debug the output only when I want to see it. So could I debug the variable? Yes, debug with var. You can also debug with message, but I don't really use that much. So you can debug and turn it into MSG and use the message, but I only want to see that. Can you do that through a jump box? Twisted Seed, I do all of my maintenance through a jump box. Yeah. Everything you guys see me do in my home lab is through P01 Jump 01. That's my jump box in my home environment. And at work, I have a jump box, like a management box that I do most of my work through. Yes. Yeah. I use Ansible in 2 ways, guys. I use it to push configurations from a central node as a management type node, or I have devices when they come up, grab information from the network and configure themselves. Those are the 2 major things that I use Ansible for. And both of them are, they're very straightforward. I'm showing you guys the pieces. This is more of like a push. This is more of a push from a central location. But we can write any of these things as we get later on down in here to make a server come up and pull information. I haven't shown you guys this in a while. But did you know that if I ever reboot P01 Jump 01, some of you guys know this from being in our Discord, did you know that this always alerts our sandbox? How do you keep on your Ansible... Turtlebeard, I do keep some of my Ansible stuff up in Git. All of this stuff that you're seeing in the labs are 100% up in Git. Yeah, so if you go to Git, GitHub, Hetanis, right? You can also ! Git over on the Twitch side. I think that'll work. Maybe. Maybe. Oh, there it is. There's. Oh, it's my GitHub. Yeah, sorry, guys. That's what it is. Twisted Seed knows my commands better than I do, which isn't surprising. Let me drop this over on the YouTube side for people as well. Guys, I claim no great coding experience or anything, right? Like my GitHub's just out there for us messing around. But Prolog labs are all right here. You can go look at all of our labs out there. And the labs are the exact same things that you're doing over here. So if you needed any of the code and you went into like Ansible labs and you needed this block of code for some reason, by the way, I told you guys, not that I would stop you if I could, but I will 100% tell you, please steal any of this stuff that's useful to you. Grab it right out of the console. Just copy it and paste it somewhere if it will work for you. I wouldn't stop you even if I could, but it's open out here. You can go in here, you can look at our assets, and here's our deploy.yaml file that we just did right there. So yeah, it's all out there if you guys need it. So I keep all these labs. People have done pull requests against these to fix things for me. I actually love that. I also love that for people that are trying to get into the industry and trying to get a little more experience and want to show that they've done like commits and stuff like that. You can do pull requests and get information out there. Look, I mean, we've had other people have contributed over time to these. And it's pretty valuable. People have helped me out a lot. I have other things that are in here. I have just example code that's not anything I would show anybody. I have some benchmark stuff. I have some patching stuff. The stream setup is how we do deployment of Bastion systems. This is actually something that I use quite often in the home lab so that you people can connect. And when I say you people, I mean anybody watching here, anybody as part of our professional Linux users group, you guys can actually connect in and get into my home lab stuff. It's called the Prolog labs for people in the Discord, but it's there's a way for you guys to connect in. I think it's open right now too. We also have a secondary way to get in, which is through a tool called Guacamole, and I'm going to be posting that more up in the system here in the next few days. I'm going to start posting that down in the Discord every day. Ranger, look at Ranger. There he is. Nobody's asked for a Ranger check, but I'm doing a Ranger check. There he is. He's sleeping. He's had a hard day of laying there, and I brought his other bed back in, so now he's got both of his beds back. His other bed was just in the other room. He just wasn't going to walk and lay in there because, Ranger things. Okay. So can you debug a variable in the playbook, but only at a high verbosity? Yes, we did that. We did all the things we needed. All right, so now the next one is Jinja 2 templates. So I'm going to bounce out of this lab, back out. Here's all the labs, guys. All these labs are free. Killer Code is probably my favorite thing online because, gosh, we could just go in there and do labs together. Just work on stuff. When I make it, I hope to have... me and my buddies, so this is like engineering jokes, right? Like engineers and stuff. We'll always joke around like, oh, I wish I made... Like my buddy Ben, I'll be like, I wish I made Ben money. And he's like, yeah, I wish I made Scott money. And then like we'll just joke around about like that kind of stuff. And I'll be like, yeah, I wish, because Ben's moving out of California. He teaches in California right now at UC Irvine, and he's going to be moving back to Colorado. So when he sells his house, there's like this big, they've had a pretty high spike in housing the last few years. So he's going to make a bunch of money on his house. And I was like, and he's like, oh, I wish to make Scott money. I said, well, when you move out of Cali, your money will feel more like Scott money, right? And there's jokes like that and stuff. Anyway, somebody on the Twitch side said something about, I hope to have a pet cam when I make it. Yeah, we always joke down in the Discord about how we know we're official. Like somebody will be like, hey, this is a great, great whatever. And we're like, now we know we're official because somebody, likes our stuff or whatever. But anyways, all right, I'm going far afield. Let's get into the lab. This is lab 7. I'm going to pin this over for you guys on the Twitch side. There you go. And we'll just leave that pinned forever. On the YouTube side, unfortunately, I don't know how to pin things, so I'm just going to drop it in there. You guys can click on that lab and follow along and do this stuff with us. We're also asking ourselves the questions on the right as we go. This is the Socratic method of learning, where we ask ourselves scenario questions and really find out if we understand things, right? So we come over here, and there's the best way I can describe how Jinja works is if any of you were kids, we were all kids at one point, but not everybody has ever seen like an ad lib, or they sometimes call them mad libs. Have you guys ever heard of those? They're like these little books that you get as kids, and you'll tell your friend like, hey, give me a noun, and they'll be like Superman, and then you'll be like, give me a pronoun, and they'll be like her, and then it'll be like, give me a color, and it'll be blue, and it'll be all these things, right? And the person that's saying the thing won't be the person looking at what's funny being scribbled out. And then it'll be like Superman flew into the blue tree to save her from whatever, right? And it basically tells this story. And that's exactly how I think of Jinja templates. I can have a template and I can just have these stupid little variables sitting there. And when it's time to push it over there, it populates with the variables. It's the exact same thing as like an ad lib or a little mad lib when you were kids. If you ever find yourself making it more complex than that, well, you're doing stuff smarter than I do. And I can't help you then because you're already way past anything I know. I do these things very simply and they work very well for me. And I do them two ways. There's two things I do. This lab, we're going to go stamp things on all the servers. As we complete tasks, we're going to stamp little things. It's almost like we're setting up little guideposts to let us know things were done on our server. That's the one way I use it. This way is probably, if I had to guess, 30% of the time how I use Jinja. I just stamp things on servers. Oh, what happened? Made me log back in? Probably because I've been talking too long. It said you've been jaw-jacking too long, Scott. You got to log back in. Let's go to Creator, make sure I'm logged in as me. Good. And then we'll go look at Ansible Labs. So the labs are pinned. You guys have the labs. Sorry for the bright screen there, but we're in Lab 7. You guys have them. Yep, okay. I'm a Chad. Yeah, definitely Chad. 30% of the time is me stamping things. The other 70% is what we'll do in Lab 8, where we pull information back and give ourselves reports. That is probably, like 70% of the time. So 30% of the time I stamp things on servers. 70% of the time I pull it back. And Chad, I joke around about being a Chad pretty often. But yeah, me and my buddies definitely give ourselves a hard time about that stuff. So verify our host file. Let's cat root hosts. By the way, your inventory file could be any file you want. You just have to point it at it. Yeah, so when I say stamp, I mean I put information on it and then I stamp over. We're going to see it right here in a second, Turtlebeard. We're going to take this template and we're going to go put it on all the servers. If we wanted to, we could have done that whole deployment from the last lab and at the end said, this server was deployed with Scott's deployer code on this time with this kernel, and I could add all these things so that what happens is, as an engineer, later on down the road, something's going to be broken in a server. This happens all the time. Something's broken in a server. And I go to the server, and they're like, well, it's on Red Hat 7.9, or it's RHEL 8.9 or something. And I go, okay, that's interesting. I don't really support 8.9 in our cluster. How did we get there? And they're like, well, your code was on it. And I go, okay, fair enough. Let me go look at my stamp when I ran it. So when I ran my server, when I ran this deployer, I stamped it over there, and oh, hey, look, here's the version of the kernel we were on then. You guys have upgraded this kernel since then. Don't you think you should tell me if you're going to upgrade the kernel in an environment where I locked the kernel version for a reason as an administrator? And they're like, oh, yeah, well, we talked to this other guy on your team, and he just did it for us. And I'm like, well, that's really awesome, but you got to understand that the versions were locked for a reason, and, this is one of these things where I was saying security is the enemy of productivity. It's not because we're combative with security. It's just that security sees things from a lens of, well, we just should always be on the newest version. And you say, that's wonderful, guys. But here in the real world, we need to be stable, and we need to work with all the versions of the stuff that we've tested across this whole cluster for things to deploy and stuff. Turtlebuild said, in my environment, we use flag files, just a text file in a specific location. Turtle, this will work exactly like that. If you want to call it a flag file or a stamp, I just call it a stamp. I just stamp it as a little file on the system. Ansible can do it for you. And let's get into doing it. So we're going to create a file called, we're going to create a Jinja 2 template called root template.j2, and we're going to stamp the values that we know about the server from the setup. So we've been doing the setup module, and we're going to make sure that we can see the information about the system. So I'm just going to copy these in, and then here's some information about it. But let's look at our two things. If we look in here, we can cat hosts. Good. Cat our template.yaml, and that's going to deploy this. And then we'll cat our template.j2. Everything fits on one screen. Awesome. So here's our playbook. It's our 3 dashes. It's going to say some arbitrary thing about the system, what it's doing, and it's going against the host group servers in the inventory file that we're going to feed in as we give it. Okay, good. No special vars. Gather facts has to be true for this lab to work. This lab will break if gather facts goes to not true because these variables won't be stamped on the servers if you don't gather facts about the servers. Basically, when I was saying Ansible has this little sack of variables, if you don't want it to fill that sack with all the variables about the servers, you turn gather facts off. But if you do that, you won't know these things about the servers. We'll test that here in a minute. But when we're ready, we're going to stamp over. We're going to copy the templates. We're going to use a template module. The source is going to be this little Jinja template down here. And the destination is just going to be root template.txt. Just going to stamp over. And what it's going to say is this is an auto-generated file by Ansible at this date and this time. The host name will be the name of the server. The system will be the Ansible OS family variable. Remember, we know how to look those up. And then proc will be the number of processors, let's say. All right, so let's run this, right? Because this is this idea I always joke around about, but it's true. One test is worth 1,000 expert opinions. We could sit here and talk about this thing all day, but let's run it and let's see what actually happens here. So we're going to run the playbook. It's going to push that over to all the hosts. And then we're going to run this little Ansible ad hoc mode to just cat it. So we'll just cat that out on both of those nodes real quick. And then we can go back and look at the template file again and say, well, this is the template that was pushed, but this is what was put on each of the servers. So on node 01, we have node 01 as the host name. And then over here, we've got control plane, and control plane was its system. The system is Debian. The number of processors was 1. Okay. So then we say, why are we stamping, or what are we stamping in our Jinja 2 template? These are all variables that we got from setup, or in this case, gather facts ran setup, right? Okay. So what arguments did we give to the template module? Well, all we gave was source and destination. So that's right here. Here's the template module. We gave a source and a destination. We didn't give anything special, right? By the way, Dragnov did the book command. You can see the book. We have a book that's out there that you guys can buy. I don't tell anybody they have to buy it, but the book looks like this, if anybody's wondering. I have it in dark mode, but the book goes with the labs as well. But we are on lab 7, so it's got more stuff to go dig into later, like going and reading about different stuff and kind of gives you more kind of in-depth. We're just going through the labs and asking ourselves questions right now. So there's different levels of how you guys want to do this. Again, nobody needs to do the book if they don't want to. You don't have to buy it. But anytime I update it, it does update for people who buy it. So that's kind of cool. I like LeanPub for that kind of stuff. All right. And I've bought stuff off of LeanPub. That's how I found out about it. I think it's a great little thing. All right. So we've looked at it. We know this works. But then I say, can you capture right over here? Can you capture the kernel version and stamp it to all the servers? Well, I think I can do that. How would I figure that out? So here's the question. I've asked myself, could I add the kernel value to all the servers? How might I do that? Well, let's go look at this command here, and let's change this to setup, which is just going to run that thing that's going to dump everything out to the screen. Look, this is going to be like 16 pages per server. So much info. So much info. And maybe guys, sometimes you want to do stuff cheap and dirty, quick and dirty. I just grep kernel. This is dirty, right? This is not really the way you're supposed to do things. You just did a system level bash command against something that was coming out from a beautiful tool called Ansible. Who cares how you get it, right? Nobody's watching you in the kitchen back there as an engineer building this stuff. They're not watching that. They see your finished product. They see this beautiful thing that you did. So look, I have Ansible_kernel. That's a variable name that I can use to get this value. So I'm going to take that line right there, and then I'm going to go, guys, I do very simple things. I'm going to VI my template. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to say kernel version, right? And then I'm going to do, if I knew nothing else about this, I could just copy that is probably the way that I set a variable right there. Customers are not allowed in the kitchen, Robodom. Yeah. I got my food handler's card. You're not allowed back here. That's funny. All right. Ansible kernel. Maybe that'll do what we expect it to. We expect it to stamp Ansible kernel and then that 5.4 0-131. So let's, right? This is one of these things. We just run it again. Oh, whoops. That's the other one. We want the right here. This will just run the stamp again, right? So we ran it. It's going to push everything. It didn't error. Didn't error because there wasn't data. And then we go and we just look at it real quick, see what's there. It's stamped the kernel version. It's good, makes me happy. That's stamping it again on each of those nodes. And then I come here and maybe I just cat the template out to see this is what we had and this is what was put over there. And it's like a little Mad Lib or Ad Lib. I think they have both. I think the Mad Libs were like silly libs. They were more silly. But yeah, here's the output and there's the kernel version. And you might say, well, Scott, I could stamp any number of things. You can. But I would caution you, get things that are super important to prove that the system was a certain way when you built a tool maybe the kernel version works. Maybe the kernel version's important. Maybe you also wanted to know that you were using a certain version of OpenSSH at the time because that required, whatever. I don't know. There's like, I can't tell you all the use cases. I can just tell you that we could definitely figure this stuff out and go and just add to this. Okay. Now we're using Jinja in the absolute simplest way it can be done. We're going to add a little bit of control structures and do some other stuff for the next part. And, I said, can we add the Ansible date time TZ? So I want to know the time zone. So now I want to know the time zone. And before I get to that, I have to figure out what the time zones are that I'm allowed to do. So earlier in one of our other labs, I showed you guys that you can give an argument here with a filter. And the filter can look for Ansible, whatever you want, date, time, X with an asterisk, right? And if I run this command, I'll link this to you guys because this comes from an earlier lab. But there it is on the YouTube side, and there it is on the Twitch side for anybody that needs it if you're going to run this in your lab. So you run it, and this will tell me everything that Ansible datetime has underneath it. So I say, okay, Ansible underscore date underscore time dot TZ will give me the time zone. And that's the question over here. Can we do an Ansible datetime dot TZ? Maybe I needed to know that my systems were all, like I expected all my systems to always be in this time zone. And maybe I just wanted to make sure that after patching, it didn't change the time zone that it originally was. So I come in here, I'm going to go look at my template. I'm going to go down here, I'm going to hit O, and I'm going to say time zone. By the way, this is your own formatting here, however you want. And then I'm going to say Ansible date time dot TZ, right? You do not need the spaces before or after this. If you like that, if that looks more clean to you, you are free to do that. That's not gonna affect your execution any. It's whatever looks more clean to you and whatever your team accepts. Since I've always just been able to do whatever I wanted to because I was always like the lead everywhere. But I guess if you are not the lead, you might have to do whatever the tech lead or the, who's ever running your stuff might want to do. So, that's just that again. Let's run the playbook here and see if it stamps the data that we need. It didn't error. That's good. So we run this to see them all, and it should have our time zone at the bottom now. Okay, now I said I'd break this. I told you guys I'd break this. Let's break the playbook real quick. How are we going to break this playbook? I said that when we look at our YAML, what if we set gather facts to false? Escape : WQ, and now we'll run it. And the facts are set to false. So then when we get to the template, we're trying to use date time as the first one we ran into, and it's not there because it was never, Ansible didn't gather the facts and put it in the little sack. But what if I say you could optionally do this? You can gather data later. You don't have to gather data up front in the gather facts. You can also only set up on certain nodes if you want to. There's some when conditions we're going to start using later where we start to find that conditionally, based on the name of the server and other stuff, we can start to add information. Okay, the wife's coming home soon, so I got to get off. Oh, wait, hold on. I got to message her real quick. Hold on. Enterprise. She's not far. Wife's not too far, so we're going to only get as far as we get today, guys. But let's run this. I can guess that this would work, but I'm pretty sure that this will now work because before we get to the execution where we go to push the template and find that we don't have the variables. By the way, that's a runtime error. Did you notice there was no syntax error? The syntax was fine. We didn't break the syntax. That's a runtime error. When we went to grab a variable, no variable existed. So we had a problem. Now we're fixing the runtime part, and hopefully it's going to gather that data up right here, and then it should copy the templates over. And then we can look at the templates again, right? When you look at this, like at the end of the day here, right? You might look at this and go, Scott, you said earlier that I do only really simple things. I do. This right here looks complex to start, but once you get this to execute in this lab, I guarantee you any one of you could go and find any of these other values and start dumping them in there. And then the next thing you're going to do is go, Scott, I know this better than you. And the last thing you'll hear me as you run away is like, yeah, you're right. You probably do know this better than me. I can't tell you guys how many times, like, there's guys down in our Discord. Pico's one of them. MPES is one of them where, like, I showed them a lot of this stuff when they first started using this. And then they'll show me stuff like a few weeks later and be like, Scott, does this look good? And I'll be like, I don't understand any of this stuff. You guys are way past me. So, and some of them are doing like, they're kicking stuff off and doing Python and all this other stuff. And there's a lot of ways to go with this. I'm showing you very simple stuff. I assure you, this stuff really just, you need to spend some time and get your hands on it. And once you get your hands on it, you're like, that's all systems administration is? You mean I could be making Scott money? Yeah, you could be making Scott money. Systems administration and systems engineering are very attainable for anybody. I tell you guys all the time, you don't need a college degree. You don't need certs. Do they help? 100%. Do I have those things? Sure. But, and I'm a big advocate for getting those things. Sure. I think that the process of getting those things will change you, even if you don't want to get the cert, even if you don't want to get the college degree. Going through the process will make you more of a systems engineer thinker, more of a systems administrator thinker, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so let's ask ourselves some more questions here. Can you create a file on each node with 3 variables from gather facts? And I say, yeah, I think I can do that. So let's just say 3 more in this case. And I go, well, I can steal this template thing. Okay. Let's run the gather. Let's run the setup on the nodes. And what other information might I want to know about these servers? What other things might be useful here? Maybe I want the architecture. So I grab the architecture. And I go throw it over here in this as a variable I need. Maybe I want to know the system vendor. I want to know if this is virtual or not, right? And then maybe I come up here. I know it's a Linux system. I know all that stuff. What if I wanted to know how the system was started? Ansible Service Manager. There we go. Boom. So now I have some other thing. I have an IT background, some Linux, but when you say that, I believe, yeah, Kurt Killer, you could definitely do this stuff. Any of you guys that watch me do this could do this. It's just you got to spend some time with it. There's our template.yaml. Let's go to our template.j2, right? And J2, again, I told you guys extensions don't really matter in Linux one bit. They're really just for us. So I come down here and I say, I'm hit O to go to a new line, and I say architecture. Architecture is, and we're going to drop this value in. Control C, Control Shift V if you're using a, because it's a weird editor, right? You're inside of a web portal here, so Control Shift V instead of just Control V. And then I say Ansible System Vendor, so I guess I would just say virtual, right? Virtualization. Right, and then here I can just drop the system vendor. And you might say, Scott, why'd you write those down? I have a sharp mind and I can remember it. Well, I don't remember things as well as I used to. So I wrote them all down. But some of you can probably remember it. And then down here we'd say service control. So how are we doing service control? This is maybe important if you're using systemd or if you're using init scripts or any of the other things that might be there. Now, if I run that, This is the test, right? Did it work? Did I take variables that don't really work or not? Sometimes it'd be like throwing a rock into the abyss, but don't hold back on asking questions in Discord. Yeah, Runamucker also, not only don't hold back on asking questions in Discord. If you're in the Discord, also ask the bot things. The bot doesn't know a lot of things, but the bot thinks it's a salty old Unix admin. I think Fisherman did that on purpose. It thinks it knows everything, but it doesn't know everything. Yeah, so you guys can do an / ask in our Discord, and you can ask the bot whatever you guys want if you didn't know that. And I think that would be funny because then he's going to have to go figure out what's going on with the bot. All right, this worked. Let's see how well it worked. Go hit our cat and see what's all there. And then now we see that our systems are similar. Now, what if you use this and then you ran this against a bunch of nodes, and then really you just used it to make sure that all the nodes were set the same way? That would be pretty easy to check, right? Cat them all out or compare them all and do a diff to see if they're different. We've got tools on the systems admin side of things called like xdish and then xdish back, where we can run a command against a bunch of servers and then get back if there's any differences on the commands. The only problem with that one would be the time. The time could be slightly different even by a second, and then you would still be able to see very quickly if all the nodes were in the same type of kernel or whatever. And you can even run those commands with filters on them so that it only found like kernel stuff or something. But the point is we can see very quickly if all our systems are very much the same. And this would be a exact stamp at a certain point in time of exactly what our system had on it, maybe at the end of some other deployer playbook like from what we did from our last lab. And that's this way that I would do this. The other way that I would do this is like this. So let's look at what these questions ask us. So yeah, could we ask the 3? Okay. Now this next one, we're going to do this one last lab, I think, because I think the wife's coming home right now. We're going to, so this one said playbook to deploy Jinja templates, and this one said the playbook to deploy a Jinja 2 report. So this is going to report only back to me. Hey SK, how's it going? I'm going to link this to you guys over on the Twitch side. Unpin. So actually, I'm just going to link it. I won't pin it. And I'm going to link it over here for you guys on the YouTube side. So, if you want to watch this and mess with this. Here's what it says. Verify your host file. So cat root hosts. There's our host file. And we're going to create a deployment playbook called root template to check the uptime of all my servers. Right? So I'm going to copy some stuff so I don't have to write it. But down here is the writing of it if you want to write it all piece by piece. And let's just look at what it's doing. It's going to copy... we're going to cat answer, sorry, it's going to be root template.yaml now. And here is our playbook. It looks just like the other one here. Now it's got a uptime, and then we're registering uptime. So now we've got a variable of the uptime of the server. And then down here, we're going to stamp it, but when we stamp it on the destination, so in root report dot, we're going to put an ISO 8601 basic. So now, each time we run this, it's going to stamp it with the time and leave it only on this server. This is not going to go and stamp on all the other servers anymore. This is going to only stamp on this server. It's a report for me. Only I want to see this on my control box. So, let's run it real quick. Actually, hold on. Let's go look at our root template.j2. And this is... much different, much different than we saw in the last one, right? Now, the top is the same, system validation, but now I started doing some wild, crazy stuff. But this is still simple stuff, guys. Unreachable systems. We are going for host in Ansible playhost all. This is the control structure in Jinja 2. It's a open curly bracket percentage sign, close curly bracket, or close percentage sign, close curly bracket. If we do a for, we have to do an end for. If we do an if, we have to do an end if. It's just going to keep going. Now, I'm doing a little sneaky thing here. I'm looping over all the hosts that started the play, like everybody that lined up to race. And then as they ran to the end, certain people might have fallen or tripped along the way, or just they weren't reachable. And at the end, as we go through a play, there's this variable called Ansible playhosts. So let's say there were 16 hosts that started in this playbook. We only have 2 for the lab, but let's say there were 16. And 4 of them were unreachable. But then right here in the playbook, before you get to the end, you were to check the variables. Ansible playhost all would still have all 16 names, but the Ansible playhost variable would only have the 12 that were left. Does that make sense? So it's almost like if you guys have ever seen a steeplechase where they go run around and then they have to jump this thing and land in water and people are falling all over. It's like the funniest race that's a real race. It's called a steeplechase. Go look it up if you want. The idea here is everybody started when the sound of the pistol or whatever, the starting line. But then when you got down to the end, only some of you made it. It's a horror movie. Only some of you made it out to the end, right? If you're not in the Ansible playhost, so you're not one of those ones, but you were in the original starting line, I drop you here. This is a simple deployer. As you run this, if you don't see a host, it'll just drop its name right there. We're going to test that here in a second. Then down here, we look for hosts that have been up longer than a day, because in this lab, they're always going to be shorter. And for this, we're going to go over all of the hosts that started. And I say, if this variable is defined, there's a reason I do that. And that's because it's possible that the host fell out before we got to uptime. And if it did, this playbook would break, because then as it walked through all the hosts, it wouldn't have an uptime variable. And it would say, it's not defined. So what we did was we just checked to see if it was defined first in this block before we drop into this inner block. And in this inner block, we look for day in the host var's host. So this will be the name of the host each time it's stepping through a loop. So it'll be control plane or node 01 here. So if day in host var's control plane dot uptime dot std out, if day is found in there, then drop this system has not rebooted in the last day. Now, this is the opposite of what I told you earlier, where I want to know if a system did reboot. Well, when I do patching late at night, and I've got thousands of nodes that I've just patched, all I want to know is the nodes that didn't reboot, because I'm looking for the nodes that have been up longer than a day when I just rebooted all my nodes for the kernel patching. Does that make sense? So this is an invert of the other thing that I normally look for. Normally, I look for day. If day is not in there, then I know that you did reboot in the last day. So I just changed the logic. If day not in. And this is Python-esque. It's all Python. You can do Python. Yeah, Python-esque. So let's test it, right? This is, I was saying earlier, one test is worth 1,000 expert opinions. Let's just run it and see if it does what we expect it to do. We expect there to be two hosts. We can get to both of them, and then we're gonna see it. So this is let's look at it. Let's look at it. It says there's no unreachable systems, and no systems have been up longer than a day. Well, we knew that. We knew that they were all shorter. So let's mess with this a little bit. Let's vi root hosts and say, well, there's actually supposed to be a node 02 and a node 03 in my environment. And then we'll run this, right? Does this break? No, it still runs. Well, it tells me I couldn't reach those nodes. Well, that makes sense, guys. The nodes don't exist, right? And I see that they failed out down here. So that's acceptable. They're not there. But this right here is only for me at the console. And maybe if I'm using a screen session or a TMUX, maybe for my other junior engineers that are watching as we're doing patching or whatever. I just say junior engineers because like typically I'll have like a team. They're not all juniors. Some of them are senior as well. But the point is they'll be watching. But this right here is going to be lost and the screen's going to scroll and all this other stuff, but not this. This right here, this was our original one, which I could delete if I wanted to. And then here's my new one. And there's those two unreachable nodes. So now if I expected those nodes to be up, I know. And guys, this is one of the things that I can tell you. Hey, how's it going, Safe Fetton, K? Hopefully this stuff's useful. Let me tell you guys something that's really, really, really critical. And I'm about to do some big patching here in a couple of weeks on one of the big clusters that I work on and making sure that everything's the same and everything's updated. And I can tell you guys one of the most important things to know as you run, let's say you're going to make a change to patch 1,200 servers, right? This is a very common occurrence for me, let's say. One of the first things I will always do before I touch those servers, even if I'm doing remember I told you guys I do my inventory check every day and I see if these nodes are down and all this other stuff. Before I ever touch those servers, I will run something like this and I will see the nodes that were down before I started. And you say, why the heck do you do that, Scott? Because I'm going to tell you one of the most maddening exercises that you want to avoid right now in a systems administration, systems engineering world is if you get to the end of a patch window or the end of a change and there's 2 or 3 nodes that are down and you're like, wait, guys, were those already down? And everybody's like, guess who now has to get those 3 servers up that may have already been down? Guess what you're doing for the rest of that night? And the rest of that change window, and it's probably going to become an emergency, is patching and fixing 3 devices that were already down for some other BS reason, but you didn't check beforehand. So now it's on you. If any of you ever did like a hand receipt in the military where you would sign for something, like I'm going to give you this little tool. I got this little tool here. It's like a little, this is like a little Gerber type tool, right? And I'm going to give it to you. But before I give it to you, you need to sign a hand receipt. And if you don't inspect it to make sure it's not broken, once you accept it, it's on you. And that's kind of the way patching works as an engineer. If I didn't check those nodes to be down before, I better get them up by the end of the night. It is a nightmare. I'm having like hot flashes just sitting here thinking about it. Not really hot flashes, but like it's like bugging me thinking about it, because I've been on calls where we had to work all night then because we just didn't check beforehand. So I built this in as part of my procedure. And I can tell you right now, 100% for sure, something like this will save you trouble as an engineer and as a sysadmin. Engineering side, when you're building projects, you can see which of your nodes are in which state. Maybe you're building I build a lot of test environments with like 10 nodes to simulate what the rest of my cluster is going to look like when I patch. And I just like to know, have I worked on some of these and whatever? Have I rebooted them? Are they unreachable, and do I know why? And this kind of little template, it might seem like a simple thing, and I think it is a simple thing, but this will save you a lot of trouble as an engineer right here. And I told you guys this earlier, this is out in the GitHub, but it's also in the lab. And if you steal it and run away like a cartoon villain and use it, you will not hurt my feelings. I would. One of the best things people tell me is later on, and I get messages down the Discord, but people also directly message me, and they're like, hey, I used that thing or whatever, or hey, I did that in an interview. Somebody just messaged me the other day. I don't know if they're around. I apologize, but they were like, hey, can I use that template you showed for an interview I'm doing later today? They were actually interviewing somebody. I was like, absolutely. Use any of this stuff. So I sent him the little way that, because I do this objective stuff. Some of you guys have been around for this, where I'll objectively, not objectify people, but I will objectively look at engineers, right? And I use this methodology for it, right? And I've shown you guys this. This is available. I think this is actually in the Discord somewhere, right? Yeah, the CSV thing with Jinja. Yeah, we could jump down to that too. I got to get off of here because I just heard the wife come home. But this is how I always do the same methodology, so that no matter how many people you ask me to do an interview with, it always looks exactly the same, just like this. So, all right. Guys, I got to drop off of here. We only got through a few of the labs today, so we'll continue this, probably rolling it through maybe even tomorrow. But we've got all these other ones to do, right? And the CSV one is lab 19, so if anybody likes, that CSV one is good for feeding stuff over to management. So, all right, I got to get off here. I hear the wife coming. But I'm allowed to stream, guys. Hold on, I'm allowed to stream. I just always pretend that she's the reason I don't longer. So, all right, we only did about an hour and a half. I try to get at least like 2-hour sessions, but we'll keep working on this. We've got a Friday, and then for sure we do all labs on Sundays. If you come by on Sundays, I know people are in different time frames around the world, but or time zones around the world, but you guys are welcome to come in, and we do all labs on Sundays. So, all right. Take care, everybody. On the Twitch side, I'm going to go try to find somebody to raid. Maybe somebody's doing something out there in the world. Something useful. Let's see who I'm following. Is Rob on? Oh, we'll go hit Harold Pulcher. He's a Microsoft guy, but we don't hold that against him because he does really cool projects. On the YouTube side, I appreciate you guys coming. I will see you guys tomorrow, or, go check out any of the other stuff on the YouTube side. I really like the persistence of that tool where you guys can go look at stuff, later on. So, okay. I will talk to you guys later.